Anatomical terms. Anatomy is a science that studies body structures and the relationships among them, whereas physiology is the science that studies both body functions or how the body part works. To be able to describe the body structure, it is necessary to use special terms that everyone understands to communicate clearly and precisely. Body positions. Descriptions of any region of part of the body assume that the body is in the anatomical position. In the anatomical position, the person stands erect, facing the observer, with the head level and the eyes facing forward. The feet are flat on the floor and directed forward, and the arms are hanging at the sides, with the palms facing forward. We can use two terms to describe a body that is lying down. The prone position is when the body is lying face down, and the supine position is when the body is lying face up. Regional names. The human body can be divided into several major regions that can be identified externally, and they include the head, neck, trunk, upper limbs, and lower limbs. The head contains the skull with enclosures and protects the brain, and the face, which includes the eyes, nose, mouth, forehead, cheeks, and chin. The neck supports the head and attaches it to the trunk. The trunk consists of the chest, abdomen, and pelvis. Each upper limb attached to the trunk and consists of the shoulder, armpit, arm, forearm, wrist, and hand. The lower limbs are each attached to the trunk and consist of the buttock, thigh, leg, ankle, and foot. The groin is the area on the front surface that the body marked by a crease on each side where the trunk attached to the hide. Directional terms. Directional terms are words to describe the position of one body part relative to another, and they are used to locate various body structures. Most of the directional terms are grouped in pairs that have opposite meanings. These are superior, inferior, anterior, posterior, medial, lateral, intermediate, ipsilateral, contralateral, proximal, distal, superficial, and depth. Body planes. Body planes are imaginary flat surfaces that are used to divide the body or organs to visualize interior structures. A sagittal plane is a vertical plane that divides the body or an organ into the right and left side. A mid-sagittal or median plane divides the body or organ into equal right and left sides, while the parasagittal plane divides them into equal left and right sides. Body sections. Sections are flat surfaces of three-dimensional structures or cuts along the plane. They are named according to the plane along which the cut is made and include transverse, frontal, and sagittal.
When we think about the composition of our body, we generally can think only to the cells. However, we are composed of the several different types of human body tissues. They are stated in this way. Tissue is the building block of an organism. Organs are made up of two or more types of tissues. There are four types of tissues of which we are made up. Muscle tissues. Muscle tissue is made up of excitable cells that are long and fibrous. These cells are ready for contraction, or the activation of tension in our muscles, making it possible for us to move our body parts. They are arranged in parallel lines and are bundled, making muscle tissues very strong. The second one is the epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue is made up of epithelial cells, which are vastly different from the muscle cells we just talked about. These cells can be flat, cuboidal, or columnar. They are joined tightly together, making a single or stacked continuous sheet. Like a quilt or slightly stitched epithelium makes an excellent protective cover for the body. In the form of skin, epithelial tissues can also be found lining some internal cavities and organs. The third one is the connective tissue. Connective tissue makes up a connective web inside our body. Holding our parts together and providing support are the main jobs of this tissue. Connective tissue fills in the spaces inside our body with a matrix made of fibers within a liquid, solid, or jelly-like substance. And the final tissue is the nervous one. The nervous tissue is found within the nervous system and it is made up of unique specialized cells. Like electrical circuits, the nervous system transmits signals from nerves to the spinal cord and brain. Cells known as neurons conduct this brain. Cells known as neurons conduct these impulses, making it possible for us to use our sense. The integumentary system is an organ system consisting of the skin, hair, nails, and exocrine glands. The skin has three layers: epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis. The epidermis is the most superficial layer of the skin that covers almost the entire body surface. The epidermis rests upon and protects the deeper and thicker dermis layer of the skin. The dermis is the deeper layer of the skin found under the epidermis. The dermis is mostly made of dense irregular connective tissue along with the nervous tissue, blood and blood vessels. The dermis is much thicker than the epidermis and gives the skin its strength and elasticity. The hypodermis serves as the flexible connection between the skin and the underlying muscles and bones as well as a fat storage area. Hair. The hair is an accessory organ of the skin made of columns of tightly packed dead keratins found in most regions of the body. Hair helps to protect the body from UV radiation by preventing sunlight from striking the skin, and also insulates the body by trapping warm air around the skin. Nails. Nails are accessory organs of the skin made of sheets of hardened keratinocytes and found of the distal ends of the fingers and toes. Fingernails and toenails reinforce and protect the end of the digits that are used for scraping and manipulating small objects. Nails grow from a deep layer of epidermal tissue known as the nail matrix, which surrounds the nail root. And finally, the sudoriferous glands. So the sudoriferous glands are exocrine glands found in the dermis of the skin and commonly known as sweat glands. There are two major types of sudorinous glands: eccrine sweat glands and apocrine sweat glands. Skeletal muscular system. 18% of our weight is composed by the bones of the skeletal system. This system is very important and necessary in our body because of its functions like support, protection, blood cell production, item movement, and triglyceride storage. There are 206 bones in our body, which are divided into groups. The axial skeleton includes all the bones that form bony structures along the body long axis. The bones of the appendicular skeleton make up the rest of the skeleton. The axial appendicular skeleton make up the rest of the skeleton. The axial skeleton is made up of the bones in the middle line of the body, which includes the bones of the skull, the hyoid bone, the bones of the vertebral column, the bones of the rib cage, which includes the vertebrae, while the appendicular skeleton includes the bones of the shoulder girdle, the upper limbs, the pelvic girdle, and the lower limbs.
Feedback is defined as the information gained about a reaction to a product, which will allow the modification of the product. Feedback loops are therefore the process whereby a change to the system results in an alarm which will trigger a certain result. This result will either increase the change to the system or reduce it to bring the system back to normal. The body can regulate its internal environment through feedback systems. A feedback system is a cycle or event in which the status of a body condition is monitored, evaluated, changed, remonitored, reevaluated, and so on. Each monitored variable, such as body temperature, blood pressure, and blood glucose level, is called a control condition. Any disruption that changes a control condition is called stimulus. A feedback system has three basic parts: a receptor, a control center, and an effector. A receptor is a body structure such as a nerve ending or sensory receptor that monitors changes in a control condition and sends input. A control center demands input. A control center sets the range of values within which a control condition should be maintained, evaluates the input it receives, and generates output commands, usually in the form of nerve impulses, hormones, or other chemical signals. An effector is a body structure such as muscle or gland that receives output from the control center and produces a response or effect that changes the control condition. A positive feedback loop occurs in nature when the product of a reaction leads to an increase in that reaction. If we look at a system of homeostasis, a positive feedback loop moves a system further away from the target of equilibrium. It does this by amplifying the effects of a product or event and occurs when something needs to happen quickly. A negative feedback loop occurs in biology when the product of a reaction leads to decrease in that reaction. In this way, a negative feedback loop brings a system closer to a target of stability or homeostasis. Negative feedback loops are responsible for the stabilization of a system and ensure the maintenance of a steady, stable state.
Skin cancer originates in the cells of skin. Some other cancer originate in other parts of the body and can spread to the skin, although these are not skin cancer. There are two main types of skin cancer, like basal cell skin cancer, squamous cell skin cancer, and melanomas. What are the risk factors for melanoma skin cancer? A risk factor is anything that affects the likelihood that you have a disease, such as cancer. Different types of cancer have different risk factors. Some risk factors, such as smoking and excessive exposure to sunlight, can be controlled. Others, such as the person's age or family history, cannot be changed. However, having a risk factor or even many factors doesn't mean that a person will suffer from the disease. In addition, some people who acquire the disease may have few or none of the known risk factors. There are several risk factors that can make a person more likely to have melanoma. Exposure to ultraviolet light. Exposure to ultraviolet UV rays is a major risk factor for most melanomas. Sunlight is the main source of ultraviolet radiation. Sun lamps and tanning beds are also sources of ultraviolet radiation, although UV rays represent only a small portion of the sun rays. They are the main cause of sun damage to the skin. UV rays damage the DNA of skin cells. Skin cancers begin when this damage affects the DNA of the genes that control the growth of skin cells. Moles. A mole is a benign, non-cancerous pigment tumor. In general, moles are not present in babies at birth, but begin to appear in the childhood and when people become young adults. Most moles will never cause any problems, although a person who has many moles is more prone to melanoma. Frequently, dysplastic nerves are hereditary. A small number of dysplastic moles can develop into melanomas. However, most dysplastic moles never become cancerous, and many melanomas appear to originate without a pre-existing dysplastic mole. People with this condition have a very high lifetime risk of developing a melanoma, so they need very thorough and regular skin exams by a dermatologist, a doctor who specializes in skin problems. In some cases, whole body photographs are taken that help the doctor recognize if the moles are changing and growing. Many doctors recommend that patients should also be taught to practice skin self-exam every month. Another risk factor is white skin and light hair. The risk of melanoma is much higher in white people than in black people. White people with blonde or red hair, who have blue or green eyes, or very white skin, who born or freckles with ears are at increased risk. Family history of melanoma. Your risk of melanoma is greater if one or more of your first-degree relative, mother, father, brother, son, or daughter have had melanoma. Approximately 10% of all people with melanoma have a family history of this disease. The increased risk may be because they share a lifestyle of a frequent sun exposure in the family, a family of very white skin, certain genetic change that are more frequent in a family, or a combination of factors. Most experts don't recommend that people with a family history of melanoma undergo genetic testing to identification, as it is not yet clear how useful this could be. Rather, experts recommend that these people do the following: skin exams by a dermatologist periodically, thorough examination of your skin once a month, and be carefully about sun protection and avoid artificial ultraviolet rays. Personal history of melanoma is another risk factor. A person who has had melanoma has a higher risk of developing melanoma again. About 5% of people with melanoma will have a second melanoma at some point in their lives. People who have had a basal or squamous cell skin cancer are also at increased risk of melanoma. Weakened immune system. A person's immune system helps fight cancer of the skin and other organs. People whose immune system have weakened due to certain disease or medical treatments are more likely to have many types of skin cancer, including melanoma. Now I'm going to talk about the risk factors of osteoporosis. But first of all, we need to know what is it. Osteoporosis is defined as a general disease of the skeletal system characterized by the loss of bone mass and by the deterioration of microarchitecture of bone tissue. Osteoporosis risk factors. Through epidemiological studies, multiple markers and risk factors have been identified that led to a greater probability of developing osteoporosis, like menopause. It is the most important risk condition for this disease. In the Western world, the average age of menopause is at age 49 is maintained, while life expectancy has increased to over 80 years. Age is an independent risk factor for developing osteoporosis, but it is strongly related to menopause in women. Genetics. Although osteoporosis is more frequent in daughters of osteoporotic mothers, it has not been possible to establish a pattern of a specific genetic transmission of the disease. The influence of the genetic load seems evident in relation to the peak of bone mass reached in the first decade of life. The lifestyle is another risk factor. It is essential to preserve bone mass. It includes aspects that have to do with diet, toxic habits, and physical activity. They are factors that have influenced each one of with a low specific way, but persistently throughout life and empowering each other. The calcium intake is another one. The intake of calcium in diet is necessary for a normal bone metabolism. During the stage of development of the skeletal condition, the maximum peak of bone mass, the healthy adult with inadequate intake of calcium has increased bone loss. Population studies have shown a lower number of fractures in geographic areas with higher calcium intake. It is important to ask the patient about the daily calcium intake, for which we can help with a food calcium survey. It is advisable to raise awareness and provide information to the population about the repercussions for bone health of an adequate supply of calcium in the diet. Alcohol is the most harmful toxic. Chronic alcohol consumption has a direct depressant effect on the activity of the osteoblasts, and it is associated with alteration of the bone mineral metabolism of calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium. Also alters the metabolism of vitamin D, causing endocrine and nutritional alteration, all of which leads the patient to an osteoporosis situation that, together with a greater frequency of falls, condition a significant increase in the risk of fractures. The physical exercise has an important role for the growth and remodeling of the bone, which also contribute to muscle pressure and tension. The sedentary habit and all the situations that entail immobilization suppose the absence of this stimuli and condition the possibility of developing a PO.
The rapid changes that threaten the global health demand an equally rapid response that must first of all be geared towards the future. it is unlikely that the great epidemics of tomorrow will resemble those that have hitherto plagued the world, thanks to advances in the control of infectious diseases. While the risk of outbreaks, for example from a new influenza pandemic, will require constant vigilance, the invisible epidemic of heart disease, stroke, diabetes, cancer, and other chronic diseases will be the one that will be changed the most in the foreseeable future, tribute in the form of deaths and disability. Chronic diseases can be prevented especially by modifying the lifestyles of the population. As indicated by the World Health Organization, most likely known as WHO, and recalls the Spanish Society of Geriatrics and Gerontology, most likely known as SEGG. The WHO and recalls the Spanish Society of Geriatrics and Gerontology, most likely known as SEGG. The WHO emphasizes that these pathologies are related to excessive consumption of alcohol, tobacco consumption, lack of healthy and balanced diets, and sedentary lifestyle or failure to perform daily or weekly aerobic exercise. This influence of lifestyles in their appearance and evolution makes their course usually slow, gradual, and in many cases silent. So, the WHO has indicated that the priority interventions for the prevention of delay in the appearance of these diseases should be aimed at improving the lifestyles of the population, which also considers low cost. The appearance of these diseases should be aimed at improving the lifestyles of the population, which also considers low cost.